o'clock. The sun has just set behind the mountain. Today is Saturday, January 15th, 2022. I have a chance to hike in a new area, and so check this place out. We just got a bunch of snow, but we've had so much sun that the snow is already mostly melted, even though it snowed last night all evening long. I think this place should be called the Craggy Wood. I've talked before about the fact that I call myself a Christian mystic. I grew up in the evangelical Christian tradition, Free Methodist, and with parents who really have a vibrant and real and honest spiritual relationship with God. They kind of stand out from a lot of Christians I know. And if you've watched my channel, you've seen that I have kind of been on an unusual spiritual journey, and I now call myself a Christian mystic. And all that means is that a mystic is someone who's had actual experience. A mystic is just someone who's had mystical or mysterious actual experiences of the divine. That's all it is. In fact, I would argue that every religious or faith tradition was all started from someone having a mystical experience of the divine and then trying to understand it. And I also shared about how I felt really alone in a lot of this because I'm in a house church that's still Orthodox evangelical, although it's a very small church and the people are a lot of fun and very open and accepting and really striving to be honest in their lives, you know, and in their spiritual walk. And the plan is that we are all journeying together. So I feel pretty comfortable with them, and they, you know, of course, don't think I'm a Christian anymore or that I'm on the verge of not being a Christian. And the interesting thing is, God showed me recently, I have experiences of living with spirit and the promptings within, Through some YouTube videos I was watching that had nothing to do with this, I ended up being kind of led to look up the Quakers, and discovered to my surprise that all of my new beliefs, my expanded beliefs, line up almost completely, 100%, with the Quaker beliefs and practices. So that was a great encouragement from God to me. So now I'm kind of part of two groups. I'm mainly in our house church because the spirit inside is telling me that's our church home. That's where my husband needs us to be. And so I've thrown myself into that group. Although it isn't easy because I have the feeling that they basically don't trust anything coming out of my mouth because I'm full of heresies, according to the evangelical belief system. But I've also, whenever we're on lockdown or whenever we don't meet with our house church, I've been attending the local Quaker group online. They're still meeting on Zoom. They have been all this time. So that has been really cool. And it is kind of funny because we all dial in on Zoom and then sit there silently for an hour, except for whoever feels led to share something from God, But anyway, I've been learning a lot about the Quakers, and I decided I have to have a Quaker character in my second novel in my Encyclopedia Magica series. So I'm studying all about Quakers and their history and all that sort of thing. So recently in my house church, someone brought up how Christianity is getting pervaded by this new and false belief that there is a piece of God in everybody. And I found that really kind of funny because, and I'm not there to be argumentative, so, I'm not there to rock the boat too much, and there's a lot of kids and youth there, and the parents want them raised in their tradition, so I usually am quiet, but I do speak up sometimes if I feel led and share from my own experiences. But what struck me about that statement is, first of all, it's not true. The belief that there's a piece of God in everybody has been around for thousands of years. And interestingly enough, when I was writing my first novel, Encyclopedia Magica Volume 1 Alchemy, I was learning all about alchemy. And alchemy has been around for thousands of years. It came out of Egypt. They did embalming and medical stuff. And it was kind of the science of the day. And back then, science and magic and faith, everything was together and things weren't separate. So you would have a person who was a prominent sort of wizard or like wise man who's studying the way life works through the sciences, which was alchemy and astrology and stuff, and also who was a Christian. So this was normal, So in alchemy, which has been around since ancient Egypt, one of the beliefs is that there is a seed of the divine in everything and in every person. And so because the alchemists believed this is why they were constantly trying to find the most highest exalted state of any item or person. They would be working on themselves spiritually while doing their scientific and physical experimentation. And part of it, now keep in mind, I'm just a beginning alchemist, right, with research. I haven't been doing it and practicing it for years. So as I learn more, I might find out more, but this is what I've understood so far, is that one of the reasons why they believed they could turn lead into gold was because they believed there was already the essence of gold within the lead, because that would be the highest exalted state of a metal, right? So they believed all they had to do was figure out what dross to remove to then let the gold out and bring out the highest exalted form of that material. So while I was studying alchemy, I really related to this idea that there is a piece of the divine in everything and everyone. I mean, it makes sense because I believe that God created everything, and if you have an artist who creates anything, there's going to be a piece of that artist in the art. I mean, it just makes sense. I'm an artist, so. And then when I was studying the Quakers, this was one of the biggest things that George Fox discovered in the mid-1600s. So people were getting tired of church and dissatisfied, tired of the excesses and what looked like it was the worldly excesses of the 1500s, and then also church leaders really just interested in politics. And it was a time in the mid-1600s when people were just feeling unsatisfied with their faith experience and with the current churches, and people were leaving churches and stuff like that and seeking something more real. And George Fox really struggled as a young man and tried different churches and stuff, but he really struggled to find the kind of faith that you could see in if you read the New Testament in the Bible. It was so vibrant. Everybody was taking care of each other and just full of love, and it was overflowing, and it was just pretty amazing. So George Fox kind of had a spiritual breakthrough, and he discovered that he could talk to God directly from within himself just by sitting quietly and seeking after the divine. And he didn't need priests and pastors and rulers and kings to mediate for him. And so this became a very central part of the Quaker beliefs from the very beginning, is that he discovered, to his joy, that there is a part of God in everybody and everything. And the reason why this is so interesting with the Quakers, because when they came to America, quite a few Quakers went to try to see to the needs of the Native Americans and try to create peaceful relations. And one Quaker came in where there were a bunch of missionaries working with the Native Americans, and from his observations he could tell that the Native Americans themselves behaved more like Christ than the missionaries that were putting all these rules on them. And the Quakers have always recognized that the Native Americans and anybody else has a piece of God within them, and they would sit with the tribes, and actually talk to them and like fellowship with them and relate to them as equals. And this was at a time when white man didn't think Native Americans were human, fully human and fully equal. So it's quite radical. And even today still, this is how the Quakers are towards everyone. They recognize that everyone has a piece of God in them, even if it's just a little dried up hole of a seed. People can ignore the divine within them, and they can fill themselves with worldly distractions and whatever they want. They have the freedom. And so that I believe that seed can kind of become just a little dried seed, but seeds don't die. We still find seeds thousands of years later that are still viable, and it's there. And it's just a matter of people desiring to have a more fuller spiritual experience and turning to God. So the Quakers, they developed this unusual practice of basically, for their worship, they've gotten rid of everything. They realized they didn't need pastors, they didn't need stained glass windows, they didn't need rituals or altars or a program or music, and they just have throughout history constructed just a very simple building, or met in homes or outside, and they just sit silently because they recognize that there's a part of God in everybody. To anybody who seeks him or her out, and I just throw that in there because I refer to God as my Father and as He, but the Bible itself says God is both male and female. And this is another funny thing that was brought up that same church meeting. The one guy that sort of leads as pastor, he was like, there's this new trend going around of calling God her. And I was like, I did speak up that time. I said, no, that's been around a long time. My mom was a Christian feminist growing up. The Bible itself says God is fully male and fully female. He's both. And Jesus himself showed some feminine qualities when he specifically said how I long to gather you under my wings like a mother hen gathers her chicks under her wings, you know. And so I will sometimes call God her, but most of the time I'm most comfortable saying him. But just know that God is both him and her. And this is nothing new. This use of calling God her has been around for many decades now, if not longer. And it's not, and I mean, it's in the Bible, so it's not heretical. So in the Quaker meeting, everyone sits silently. They usually designate an hour, and they recognize that the leading of the Spirit within can come to anybody, even children. And back then, also women, where in the 1600s, no one else would let women be ministers, but the Quakers recognized everybody was the same as far as this goes. And so there were a lot of women ministers. And anyway, so the Quakers sit silently for about an hour and in expectant waiting and listening for the voice of the Spirit within. And this is a practice that they practice all the time too. It's not just once a week. It's throughout the week, and learning to practice God's presence in every moment and in every part of our lives. And yes, I do consider myself a Quaker now. And so we sit in silence. It's an amazing practice. And then whoever, you know, if someone feels like they have a word from God or from the divine or from Spirit, there's all different words that you can use for that. But then if they feel led, then they share that. And it's really a practice about learning to live from the guidance of the Spirit and not from our ego, which is our flesh nature, which is the thing that, while necessary for human survival, tends to get us in trouble and is the source of evil and stuff like that. You know, so our cruelty and bad things that we do come out of our ego nature. And so, and this is also part of alchemy as well. It was also a part of alchemy to recognize our two natures and to try to learn the perfect balance between the two, and not to vilify either one or exalt, you know, not vilify one or exalt the other. Realize that they're both there for a reason. But it's important that the ego nature is not the master, but serves under the Spirit, our divine and spiritual nature. That is the one that's connected to God. And it's best if that one is the master, because that's when we live in peace and contentment and joy. So I had an interesting thing that happened to me this week. Part of my spiritual journey is learning to listen to the inner voice, the part of me that's connected to God, my source and creator, and learning to respond to the guiding of the Holy Spirit within. Lately, I've been watching a lot of TV. I love movies and shows, but it's been a lot every evening, you know, and I've been kind of feeling some promptings of the Spirit to maybe for Lent or some other way to step back and not quite be watching quite so much TV. And this last week, I have a few shows I'm watching now with my husband, and I want to finish them. Last week, my family wanted me to start a new show with them, so I did. But like the whole time we were watching it, I just found I've been spending more time in spiritual readings and in silence and meditation and stuff, and so I found the absolute gory violence to be a little bit much. I didn't like it. And on top of that, the whole time I'm watching this first episode, I felt the Spirit prompting me that this is not for you to start watching the show. You know, this is not the time, and this is not for you right now. But of course, I was in the middle of watching the show, so I kept watching it. But that little niggling kept, you know, that little prompting kept coming. And then I thought, well, I'm gonna just finish this first episode and then I'll get up and leave. But then the first episode finished and they started the second one right away. I didn't get up and leave. It's funny how sometimes God has to come tapping our shoulder several times before we'll actually respond. But finally, halfway or partway through the second episode, my family took a little break to get water and stuff, and I took that opportunity to get up and just excuse myself and say, I don't want to watch this show. And so it's just a little thing, right? But I went upstairs, and it was in the evening, and I ended up going on a walk around the block in the cold night, and it was really cool being outside. I loved it. I'm leaving the Craggly Woods. And then after that brisk walk outside, I sat down and just decided to knit. I kind of took a break from knitting over the summer and I missed it, so I'm getting myself back into it. I have a challenging and very interesting sweater I'm working on using unusual technique. And I could hear the sounds of the TV show coming up because we don't have a door between upstairs and downstairs, and we have kind of a smallish, simple house. And so I put in my earbuds and listened to quiet music. And I have to tell you, just the act of listening to that prompting of spirit and just responding and obeying and just doing it and then doing those things just filled me with such joy and contentment. It was amazing. I just felt so full of peace. It was like, yes, this is what I'm supposed to be doing right now. And there's just something about that. It's pretty incredible. And it just makes you want to always listen to the voice and respond a little quicker next time, you know. And so there's something about living by spirit, knowing that God is with us all the time. There's never a single moment we're away from our own source, our connection to God. No matter what you call it, it's there. And I do firmly believe in this Quaker belief and alchemist belief that there is a piece of God in everything and everybody. The artist touches in us and his presence is there. And it's just a matter of wanting to know him and turning to that part of us that is part of the divine. Some people call it the higher self. In the Bible, it's called, I believe it's the same thing as the Holy Spirit. And in the Quaker terminology, sometimes they call it the light within, or the light, or the Christ within, or the divine spirit, or spirit within, you know, things like that. So that's my answer to that whole topic, which I didn't feel comfortable getting into there at house church because I'm not there to argue, you know, and create debates, and they're not seeking alternate viewpoints. We have a herd of mule deer over there. I'm walking back to my car.